Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobby Capucci, and this is Daily Drop number 9. Today we have an article from the Daily Mail, and it's going to talk about Jeffrey Epstein and some of the things he did in the words of the young ladies that suffered the abuse. So what we'll do is we'll go through the article like usual. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time, what we do on these Daily Drops is we read through a couple of articles that are important to the story that maybe we think should be getting more publicity in the media, but obviously it isn't. So what we do is we go through those stories here and we discuss what we think about them. And one way or the other, we try to come to a point where this stuff starts, maybe even if we don't get all the answers, it would be nice if some of this stuff started to make sense. A little bit more sense would be nice, because it seems like there's so much nonsense surrounding this case that it's almost impossible to track down good, hard leads and good, hard evidence, I guess you would say. And then you get a story like this, where the girls, tell you what happened to them in their own words. And it's pretty horrifying, honestly. Sometimes we lose sight of the fact that these are human beings who are being treated like this. And, we sit here and I cover it from a media perspective. And as consumers of news, you guys suck it up, and me as well. And, we suck this stuff up. And, sometimes it gets lost in the whole entire fray because we get so angry about what's occurring that there's people that truly need justice in this case. And as long as the media continues to stay silent, there's never going to be the kind of justice that's truly deserved. And we even see it in other cases, like with Ronan Farrow and Weinstein. Weinstein had ex-Mossad agents trailing this guy, all because he was going to drop a story about his, deviousness. So you can't put it past any of these people to be, involved in really low-down, dirty nonsense. So, anyway, with that said, we're going to jump into this article and we're going to do what we do here at the Daily Drop. Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell spent $250,000 on the education of a South African girl, allowing them access to thousands of other girls who attended the same elite institutions. Melissa was a young girl growing up in post-apartheid South Africa when Epstein came into her life and offered to serve as the young girl's benefactor, paying her way through boarding school and then college. She explained on the latest episode of Broken, Jeffrey Epstein, that she was far more skeptical of the situation than the adults around her at the time, who were unaware, of Epstein's nefarious needs. Her music teacher explained that it was perfectly normal for promising students to have sponsors. Her parents were happy to have their daughter thousands of miles away from the violence at home, and Maxwell tried to quell any unease by stating, "Think of him as kind of like a Schindler person who takes people and gets them out of hard places and hard situations." Okay. So a Schindler person? Oh boy. All right. That Schindler person Maxwell was comparing Epstein to is Oskar Schindler, the German industrialist and member of the Nazi Party who saved the lives of over 1,000 Jewish people by employing them at his factories in occupied Poland during the Holocaust. Unlike Schindler, however, Epstein eventually left Melissa to fend for herself, cutting off the teenager who said in her last conversation with Maxwell she informed her that she would not miss a cello recital to meet Prince Andrew. Boy. So this just, that little tidbit there shows you what Miss Maxwell thought about Epstein. She had him on this pedestal. She compared him to somebody like Oskar Schindler, and we all know that Epstein was nowhere near anything like Mr. Schindler. Maxwell first gave another reason as to why Epstein was willing to put up the money for Melissa at first. "You've got beautiful blue eyes, and Jeffrey loves blue eyes," said Maxwell. Melissa was in a bit of shock and replied, "But you don't pay $50,000 for a person's eyes." That was the cost of Melissa's boarding school, which she agreed to attend only after spending one more year in South Africa. She was just 14 and attending a summer session at the Interlochen music camp when she met Epstein, who within 24 hours had promised to pay so she could return to the camp next summer. All right, so we see the pattern forming here, typical of Epstein. Looks for girls that are maybe in need, in distress, and then moves in for the kill, meaning looks to groom them, looks to cultivate them into what he wants them to be. Melissa met the pair as they were loitering around a wishing well on the Interlochen campus. She herself was never sexually abused by Epstein, however, and it is unclear why, as the teenager, was very much in line with the aesthetic the pedophile seemed to desire in his underage victims. This was also happening. This is a poorly written article. You guys will see when I post the link. This was also all happening over a period between approximately 1997 and 2003, when Epstein was sexually abusing 3 or 4 girls a day. 3 or 4 girls a day. And now remember, all these people had no idea he was doing it. Melissa instead became a beneficiary of the pair's goodwill, and she recalls one instance when they visited her at camp and gleefully asked her to identify her favorite cake. She told the two strawberry shortcake, noting it was the first thing that came to mind and not her actual favorite. And within minutes, a freshly baked and still warm strawberry shortcake was delivered to Epstein's cabin. Melissa noted how amazed she was by this feat, since Interlochen is located in a rather remote area of Michigan. Epstein had donated around $400,000 to the camp prior to this, which is why he had his own cabin and was able to spend time with the teenagers in attendance each summer. All right, so another pattern we see with people like this, with this kind of money, they use their money as donations to gain access to these younger people so that they can cultivate them and bring them into their atmosphere and have them maybe feel like they belong to something bigger as opposed to just being abused as part of almost a quote-unquote family. Back to the article. When he met Melissa, he spoke about her cello music and the musicians in her family, almost as if he had a dossier prepared for him prior to his run-in with the underage stranger. A dossier prepared. Sounds like intelligence to me. Isn't that the sort of thing they like to do? Melissa would spend 6 years and eventually fall out of favor with the couple when she refused to recruit her classmates at Juilliard for the pedophile. At least I will give the Daily Mail this. They're not calling him a financier. They're labeling him correctly and calling him a pedophile in this article. At the same time, she had turned down a full scholarship at a conservatory in New England to attend the prestigious college in New York at the insistence of Maxwell and Epstein, who assured her they would cover her tuition for all 4 years. Melissa said that soon after she made it clear she would not recruit others, she received a bill for $100,000 for her tuition, and she was told her bill had been sent back by Epstein with a note that stated he would no longer be paying for the cellist's education. It all came to a head when Maxwell came and visited her at school one day. Maxwell noticed a ballerina on campus and told Melissa she wanted her to go ask the girl to give Epstein a lesson, with the pedophile having built a ballet studio in his home by that time. Melissa demurred and then flat out refused, which is when Maxwell revealed the real motivation behind her and Epstein's philanthropy. "How does it feel to have your life handed to you on a silver platter?" asked Maxwell. "And how would you feel if it was taken away?" Maxwell then called her with one final task a short time later, to come meet Prince Andrew at Epstein's home. Melissa said she was confused as to why a member of the royal family would have any interest in meeting a college student and asked Maxwell as much. "Oh, man. You're a talented cellist. You're charming. You're so many things," explained Maxwell. "He'd love to meet you. Just come to this party." I am 100% sure that that's the reason Andrew wanted to meet her. He had no other motives to wanting to meet this young lady. He wanted to hear her play the cello. He needed a few tips. Maybe he was writing his own song. Maybe, he was going to be the newest royal musician to take the stage. I don't know what his story is, but I highly doubt it was anything that had to do with real music. Melissa did not want to go, and more importantly, could not go on the night in question. There was a concert that day, and I said, "I can't miss the concert," and she said, meaning Maxwell, "But you can miss the concert, and you will miss the concert." Melissa then began to laugh at Maxwell as she recalled. "I told her that if you miss a performance, you can be expelled, and she said they would make an exception for me. And I said, they won't make an exception. They didn't make an exception for Yo-Yo Ma." It was shortly after this exchange that Melissa received her tuition bill for $100,000, and calls to Epstein and Maxwell were never returned, while his lawyer, Darren Indyke, simply apologized to the girl. And they said, yeah, it was actually sent back with an instruction that the bills are now to go to you, and that I am now responsible for these bills, said Melissa. That was really terrifying. She later discovered that she had applied for financial aid. She would have gotten her tuition covered for all 4 years. Melissa was very much a victim of Epstein and offered her assessment of him. He had an addiction to playing games. He had an addiction to finding the gap between him and the person and in finding what they needed, explained Melissa. Once again, like we talked about, guys like this, especially guys that have been turned into assets by intelligence and set loose, they have a pattern. They operate in a certain way. They use certain tactics to groom girls or people in general to do things that they want them to do without them thinking that they're being used. And we see it time and time and time again. And he had this fetish and this sickness that he really wanted this power of making things possible for people. In the end, her only physical interaction with Epstein was a foot massage. It is impossible to know now why she was spared what so many other girls her age were not at the hands of Epstein, but it could be explained by her poise and intellect. The young girl was incredibly wise and engaged with Maxwell and Epstein, which may be why she was not subjugated to the sexual abuse endured by so many other victims. And unlike other recruiters, her relationship was not sexual before she was cast into that role. It is possible that it was Maxwell grooming her for another man, perhaps Prince Andrew. So, again, we continue on with another story about Prince Andrew here, and another Jeffrey Epstein story where Prince Andrew is wrapped up in it. Now, I ask you, as I would imagine right-thinking folks, don't you think that he needs to at least answer some questions? I mean, obviously, I don't think the royal family is going to accept him coming to America and being, sat down in a room and being interrogated that way. But at the very least, we have field offices overseas, or agents can even fly over and at least take this man's statement, because I don't know, I didn't do it, I wasn't involved, I never hung out with Epstein, I was breaking up the friendship. None of that stuff cuts the mustard. None of it. Does any of that stuff sound legitimate to you? It certainly does not sound legitimate to me. And again, we see the sort of thing that Jeffrey Epstein was up to. It was all about information with this man. All he wanted to do was compile, I guess it says it in the article even, dossiers on folks. He was working like he was his own intelligence agency. He was using all this, if he wasn't an intelligence agent, he was using all the same tactics and moves that intelligence would use to compile data on somebody. So he either had a really good teacher, aka the Maxwells, and that was it, and they were compiling the information on their own, which I find very hard to believe. If that was the case, there would be no way he would have ever been even admitted into the circles that he was admitted to. We're talking about hallowed halls. We're talking about rubbing elbows with some of the most elite, most powerful people in the world, and you're telling me that this guy's just going to show up from nowhere and be part of the crew? Come on. He was introduced by these people for a certain reason, and we see what that reason is. The more articles we read, the more we follow the breadcrumbs, the more we put the pieces together, the more smoke we see. There's fire there. There's questions that need to be answered, and I'm not saying here that I have any answers for certain in this case, because none of us do. But when you start following the evidence as an investigative journalist, you just have to follow it wherever it leads, and sometimes it takes you on a wild ride like it's taking us right now. And no stone should be left unturned in this situation. And it's nice to see the Miami Herald still going strong with some of their articles, and the Daily Mail has been really strong when it comes to stuff surrounding Andrew. And it has to be a full-on press. You see with Wexner, it looks like he's suffering. L Brands has lost a ton of money in the stock market, and there's talk about firing of employees from L Brands. It was an article in the Times the other day. So, look, we're definitely at a very crucial point in this case. A lot of stuff is coming out. More information's dropping daily. More webs are being weaved, and more rabbit holes are being dug, it seems like. But at the end of the day, what we have to do is try and stay focused and make sure that we just stay on target here. And that's what I plan on doing every single day. We'll just keep dropping these news pieces and we'll keep reading them and we'll go over them and I'll analyze them from my perspective. And that doesn't mean it's, that's the only perspective out there. That's just the way I'm seeing things from my experience covering stuff like this and being involved in things like this. So, like I said, I want to hear from all of you guys. If you have something to say about the show, you guys want to chat about different things that have to do with this topic, Mr. Epstein and his disgustingness, let's hear it. So until then, I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Hope you guys enjoyed the show, and let's get at it.